Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last session of Chatting on the Porch for 2023. My name is Brian Trippett. I am the Front Porch Conservative. This is Chatting on the Porch, where we gather together to talk to interesting people and learn a lot of new and interesting things. We are on YouTube. We are on Rumble. We are on Twitter. So if you haven't done it yet, send out a tweet, send out a Gettr, send out a Truth Social. Send out whatever you got and tell everybody, get yourself in here, because the party is about to start with one of the most interesting guests that I think I could bring on, especially given the times we find ourselves in and especially given the times we are about to go into, but from a slightly different angle. So let me drop the music down a little bit. Let's see who's here so far. Z Highness, woohoo, my dear. You love to see you. Up in Connecticut, you've got your wish tonight, dear. And Traveler, I understand completely. Enjoy your time with your family, brother. Oh, my goodness. So good to see everybody in here so far. So let me do some things here, bring on our guests, because we have got a lot to talk about. Oh, my goodness. In the day and age in which we find ourselves, it is always frustrating to try and figure out what is actually the state of our economy, be it personal or on a macro level at a national level. You read one newspaper, say, for example, the New York Times, you happen to read, a column by somebody who supposedly knows something about economics, Paul Krugman, and you come away going, huh? Because the reason you're going, huh, is because when you go to the grocery store or when you go to the gas station, you're paying more now than you ever have, but you're being told, oh, the economy's great. Everything's awesome. Inflation's going away. Well, we'll see about that. I have a guest tonight, and I have to give a shout out to one of our regulars on the front porch up in Connecticut who recommended that I invite this lady on, and having talked with her briefly, emailed each other, I am convinced, this is going to be a load of fun. So with that said, my next guest holds a PhD in economics from Wayne State University in Michigan and has been teaching economics now for over 20 years. Her areas of specialty in classroom instruction include principles of micro and macroeconomics, money and banking, comparative economic systems, labor economics, and managerial economics. And unlike professors of economics, she injects a healthy dose of free market capitalism into all her lectures. Given her love of free market economics, you won't be surprised to find out that some of her influences include Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, and F. Cleon Skousen. What might surprise you, though, is that my guest infuses textbook economics with modern-day communications methodology from folks like the late Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin to try to convey to her students the importance of economic principle, particularly free market economic principle, and why those principles lead to a more prosperous society. As a result of her work, it is estimated that over 90% of her students exit her courses to become avid libertarians and fiscal conservatives. She is currently a professor of economics at Marshall University. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the incomparable Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Robin, welcome to the Electronic Front Porch.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a little chilly out here.
Indeed it is.
But much warmer than it was last year.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about living in West Virginia. Just wait long enough. If you don't like the weather, it will change, because it could be 30 degrees one day, 60 degrees the next, and that's in the middle of December. And yes, we've had that recently. So there you go. Oh, goodness. I am so glad to have you here on the porch, and so glad you're here, because my little channel has been in existence now for officially, it'll be 9 months at the beginning of January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've had all kinds of interesting folks come on. It's kind of ironic, because I had a PhD in American history. You may have heard of Dr. Larry Swikert, who was on just about a month or so ago, and we had a wonderful conversation. However, economics is one of those areas that I don't feel gets nearly enough attention. And when my listener up in Connecticut recommended I talk to you, I started checking you out. I'm like, we definitely got to talk. We absolutely have to talk. So, yeah, I'm absolutely looking forward to this. So let's just dive right in.
Let's go.
For those who are not familiar with you, where did you grow up? Give us something about your background, and how is it that you found your way into a love of the study of economics?
Oh, okay. So I'm born and bred in Michigan. My family
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Are we talking? Are you a Spartan or a Wolverine fan? There's
I
no wrong
confess,
answer here.
I confess I'm a Wolverine fan.
Okay, folks, I want to thank you so much for stopping
I
by.
grew up right next door.
Oh, okay, all right then. Oh, yeah, all right.
If I'd grown up closer to Lansing, I probably would be a Spartan fan. But no,
Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of Ohio State fans are going to be watching this going,
I'm sorry.
no, I mean,
Listen, it's okay. Both my kids are stump jumpers, so one goes with Michigan and one goes with Ohio. So
all right.
we got the whole family's been split. But I have to tell you that since I've lived here in West Virginia, I am totally thoroughly a Marshall fan, and I have forsaken my Wolverines, and I'm cheering all the time for the Herd. So, you know,
Well, and we are glad because, Lord knows we need all the help we can get, and especially after watching that debacle the other night
we're
at the
not going to
Frisco
talk
Bowl.
about that.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Absolutely not. So,
Next year's a new year.
that's right. It's kind of like the Cubs. There's always next season.
That's right.
So you grew up in Michigan.
Right.
I will not interrupt you anymore. Go on.
Oh, you can interrupt me. Yep, I grew up in Michigan. My family has been in Michigan for generations. So the little town where my grandparents and my great grandparents were was in northern Michigan. So I grew up thinking Michigan was my backyard, the whole state, even the northern UP part.
Okay.
I I I started college right out of high school, but I also started a family right out of high school. So college very quickly became a second list to do sometime in the future. And when my youngest child went to kindergarten, I went back to college. So I'm really, truly a non traditional student. I thought at the time that I wanted to teach mathematics in high school. So I directed my studies that way.
Okay.
But it didn't take me too long to figure out that the K-12 system was not going to be the place for me. And so when I searched around for, okay, now I've got all these math classes, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And my math advisor said, why don't you get a degree in actuarial sciences, which will combine math with economics? And I thought, okay, we can try this. My first day in econ class, so it was literally Econ 101.
Okay.
Microeconomics, the way the professor explained things, I thought, aha, this explains so much about what's going on out in the economy. And I latched on to that like a tick on a hound dog, and I did not let go. And the deeper I dove into economics, the more I realized that what I really truly wanted was to understand how the economy worked so that I could look into my crystal ball and see what was coming at me from the future. And so I directed my steps in economics. I did spend 5 or 6 years out in the real world with a real job as an actuarial technician, working with companies to help them value their benefits programs, retirement benefits, and health benefits, and such. And I went back to Eastern Michigan to get my graduate degree in economics, and then I just poured myself right into a PhD program. And so coming out of that PhD program, for me, it was a lot of intense research. I discovered that these theories that we talk about at a very deep level, I discovered that there were two main branches of theories. One branch of theories focused on individual choice, if you're running a business, an individual business choice. And the other branch of theories focused more on what government could do to the economy, to individuals. So diving down into these theories, I started discovering holes in the theories. These holes were more prominent in the government should do something side than in the individuals make choices and businesses make choices side. And so most of my PhD, most of my research really was focused on historical aspects of how we got to where we are, what government policies were instituted that herded the people in a general direction. And you can see the results of some of these policies right now, right? If so, most of the people in government follow the government should do something. You know, it's a lot like, I don't like what's happening over there. There ought to be a law against it, kind of thing. So one of the results of government should do something is, okay, how about Bidenomics? How's that working out for you? You know, we are well and truly down. We're almost over the cliff now, as far as I'm concerned. What I see coming at us is extremely high rates of inflation. I see businesses closing their doors. I see the commercial real estate arena just collapsing, and followed very quickly by the property market, the private property market. So you know, it's that if you run these government policies that are socialist or communist in nature, what you're going to find out over the course of 6 or 7 or 8 decades is that it has a very bad outcome for people. And we're right there right now, today.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I do, yeah. When you're describing the theory of government action, that oh hey, something's wrong, let's do something about it, kind of reminds me of a line from the original Jurassic Park movie where the main characters are sitting around the dining room, and Jeff Goldblum's character looks at Sir Richard Attenborough and says, "Yeah, and your guys spent so much time figuring out how to do it, you didn't stop long enough to ask if you should."
Right,
And
Malcolm.
yeah, Malcolm, and that to me is modern day governmental action. I mean, as you have a libertarian bent, I'm sure you're familiar with the late PJ O'Rourke and his great maxim: giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys.
Right.
He didn't have to finish the sentence. Everybody knows what that usually means. It winds up being a disaster in one form or another. But I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago, and the reason, the pursuit of the PhD, was it with the intention to go into a teaching career, or was it more for a career outside of academics?
Oh, he froze.
Oh, did I?
Say that again, please, Brian.
Sorry
You froze a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, was the pursuit of the PhD for the purposes of an academic career, or was it for a career outside of academics?
Well, I had already determined, you're going to like this. I determined when I was 5 years old that I was here to be a teacher. I just didn't know what I wanted to teach. Remember, I said I went back to school to be a high school math teacher.
Right.
So when economics was infused in my DNA, when I went back to get my master's degree, it was for the intention of completing my PhD so that I could teach. Because I thought, look, if I can use my crystal ball, using my economic theory and what I know how the economy does work, if I can take that information and give it to students, then or explain to students how it works, then they can protect themselves too and their families.
Right.
So it's not just that I feel like I'm not just teaching a class for students to get a degree or just to have a class because it's required, or an elective. I want the information that I give to my students to be valuable to them, so that regardless if they get a degree in economics or business or basket weaving, they can go out and use the things that they've learned in my class to help protect themselves and their family from crises that inevitably will come their way through the economy. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I'd already known since I was a little girl that I wanted to teach. It was just a matter of finding that that vehicle that I could use to do that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about something from your bio. Friedman, Hayek, Skosen, von Mises, and Rand. Now, I'm going to ask a question, and I'm really dying to hear your answer on this, because everybody comes to the influences they have by a number of different means.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that these economists, okay, garner so much of your attention and inform so much of your thinking and your teaching, as opposed to, say, a John Maynard Keynes, a Frederick Engels, Paul Krugman, Jim Cramer, whomever? Why these guys as opposed to these guys?
Well, let's think about this for a minute.
Okay.
Your favorite, Paul Krugman.
Yes, the greatest twerp that the New York Times ever employed.
Does he ever? Is there anything that he spews out of his mouth that would lead you to the truth?
No, but he does love to spew. I do give him
He
that.
spews a lot. He really
that
does.
Indeed. Yeah, kind of like Linda Blair from The Exorcist.
Right. Well, I did study John Maynard Keynes. I spent an entire semester studying his book, which now eludes the entire name eludes me, but it was the book that basically started macroeconomics. Maybe one of your people in chat can drop it in there. I think it was The Theory of Money and Interest Rates. It was something like that. He wrote it in the 1930s to explain how central banking could help a government control the economy. Now, note how I said that. A central bank could help a government control the economy. And if you read the last chapter, in that last chapter of his book, he talks about population control.
Okay.
Population control. We're not saying birth control. We're talking about population control. Now, when I first read that book, I thought John Maynard Keynes was the shit. I thought he was just to die for, smartest man on earth. Everything he spoke was God's word.
Mm-hmm.
But then I start diving into some of these other economists, Milton Friedman, for example. And the difference was between Keynes and Friedman was that Friedman was focused on individual liberty, individual choice, not how government can help control the economy. Friedman's and Hayek and these other economists that I like to follow, Thomas Sowell, they are more concerned with individual choice and then how that ripples out into the economy, rather than having a top-down government squash everything and stick its nose into everybody's business. So that, remember I said I found two pathways through economic theory. One focused on individual liberty, individual choice, the choice an individual business will make, and the other one focused on government control of the economy. Well, John Maynard Keynes falls right into that. And so my deep studies of these various economists showed me that there were some economists that were more interested in control and power and government grift than other economists. And I personally detest being controlled. I don't like it when somebody tells me what to do and how to do it and when to do it and if I can do it. And I just want to give them a famous West Virginia hand signal. By the way, it's the same thing in Michigan. It's the same hand signal.
The Michigan finger of friendship.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. The mitten finger. And so I studied all of these economists, and to the point where I could put into one classification those economists that would look at economics with an eye towards how does a person use this information to keep themselves going towards prosperity and liberty. And there were another column of economists that all they wanted was for there to be more government and for that government to have more power and more control. And it turns out that I'll bet you Krugman would not call himself a communist, but yet he is, because that's the economic ideology that he espouses.
Yeah, and it amazes me, and you know, although I'm not as well versed in economic theory as you are, quite obviously, you know, from my training and background, freedom tends to make an economic situation better for not just the individual, but for everyone involved. If you I mean, Friedman's great book, if I remember correctly, is Free to Choose, if I remember the title of his great work correctly. And the idea being that in a free society, absent government coercion, that if individuals are allowed to make a choice, they will, out of self-interest, create for themselves a prosperity that ripples beyond just themselves. It'll ripple out into everything else. I mean, the great example that Milton Friedman always gave, and I'll never forget years ago, the interview with Phil Donahue. He holds up a number 2 lead pencil. Come on, Brian, get the proper prop here. Holds up a number 2 lead pencil and proceeds to explain to Phil Donahue every step that's involved in the creation of a single number 2 lead pencil. And if you go back and watch that interview, which you can find on YouTube or almost anywhere else, it's amazing the steps that are involved and how many people's hands are involved in the creation of a single number 2 lead pencil. And Friedman proves his point that if you let people choose what they wish to do in their own lives and decide their own economic destiny, it creates a better and more prosperous society. And it never ceases to amaze me, especially in light of world history. You know, you can take a look at the Soviet Union, you can take a look at Venezuela, you can take a look at any modern country you wish, who have tried a command control economy, and then look at what happened to them, and then look at the alternative, and you're sitting here going, why are we even listening to you guys anymore? I'm shocked that we're even giving you guys the time of day.
Well, we stopped giving those communists the time of day by the end of the 1960s, when we figured out that communism really wasn't going to work. And around the end of the 1960s, a guy came along by the name of Jacques Derrida that sort of transformed. Oh, I've got a bug in the house. That transformed. I don't know where he came from.
It's cold outside. The poor thing's trying to get warm.
I know. It's probably a stink bug. Anyway, Jacques Derrida transformed the idea of communism into what he called postmodernism, which is really nihilism. You know, it's that the individual is nothing. It doesn't matter if they live or die. There's nothing beyond me, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very, in my opinion, it's a very demonic way of thinking, because there's no life in it.
Yeah. No, I
don't know. Did I answer your question?
No, you did. You did.
Okay.
You did. Let's talk about the academy, broadly speaking, higher education, and even secondary education, because there's something that I've been trying to figure out for years. I had an old professor of mine, and he's actually from Huntington. I had to go away to school to find him. And his tongue-in-cheek conclusion is that economics was great when guys like Hayek, Smith, and others had a hold of it, and then the mathematicians got in there with all the graphs and charts, and everybody went, "Oh yeah, I don't learn this now. Terrible." Now, that leads to my question. First of all, he was being tongue in cheek, but I don't know that he was totally wrong either.
I don't think he was wrong.
Why is it that economics, particularly microeconomics, because the goal that you had when you went into teaching is probably one of the most noble that I've ever heard. And that is, I'm not just necessarily doing this for myself. I'm doing this with the hope that my students will learn from this and be able to protect themselves. If that's the case, then why is it that economics, particularly microeconomics, is not more emphasized in modern education today, even starting down at a secondary level? This could be taught in high school in such a way that if it's done correctly, it could do there what you're doing at Marshall University and have done throughout your career, and that is get kids really excited about economics, and they start applying these principles, and they start realizing, yeah, there's a much better way to do things personally and as a nation.
Okay. Well, first, every human on this planet is a born economist, and you know far more about economic theory than you give yourself credit for. For example, when you get your paycheck and you go to the grocery store, say you went this week, did you pay more for groceries than you did 3 years ago? I'll bet you did. Yeah, a lot, a lot.
Yes.
And we, one of our founding theories, found maybe an axiom in economics, is that people are rational. In other words, we have to assume that people think critically, that they are logical thinkers. Because if we make the assumption that they are not, that they're not logical, not rational, cannot think for themselves, and somebody else has to do their thinking for them. That's where government steps in, by the way.
Oh,
So
yes.
that's the first thing. The second thing is we could teach economics to third graders. There's a series of books titled The Tuttle Twins, and I got to meet the authors out in Las Vegas in 2017, and they had a couple of books written already, and they were their ideal target market was a fourth grader.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So we could be teaching economics to fourth graders. And then my third comment about that is, why on earth would the government want anyone to be able to understand the economy so they could protect themselves from the shit that comes at them through the economy?
Why, madam, you are aspiring nefarious motive to a government. Don't you know the government is here to make our lives better and help us in all things and make sure that we're safe and secure? If only we surrender to them just a little bit of liberty and a little bit of money and a little bit of power,
And all of our guns.
we'll get all, yeah, and all our guns, and we'll get all this. We'll be perfectly fine.
Right. Well, Ronald Reagan had it right in 1980 when he said the 9 most dangerous words in the world are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but here's the thing about the K-12 education system, which was basically taken over by the government in the late 1950s. And I know that we got the Department of Education from Jimmy Carter in the mid to late 1970s, but that was just the final piece. The government had already taken over the education curriculum from 1958. And guess who was in charge of that?
The government.
Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller.
Oh, God.
Okay, so Rockefeller said in 1958, give me 10 years and I will have all the textbooks in the K-12 system rewritten so that we, the government, controls what the children are learning.
Now, refresh my memory for those who are watching, and also for myself. Nelson Rockefeller was the former governor of the state of New York for a significant period.
I don't think it was Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yes, Nelson Rockefeller was governor of New York, but I'm not certain it was the same
if it's
guy.
the same Nelson.
Same family. Same family, same ideas.
Okay, then I stand corrected then. Okay.
Well, someone can correct me, that's fine. But my point is that since the government has taken over the K-12 education system, lock, stock, and barrel, what how have our children improved in their education?
They haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
they
would the
haven't.
government see? Henry Ford had it right in 1925 when he said, "We don't want the population to be educated. We just want them to be educated enough. We want them to be educated enough so that they keep working these dead end jobs, so that they keep paying their taxes, so that they keep buying the things that we are having them make. But we don't want them to be too educated to figure out that we're really swindling them."
A titan of the American economy. What a wonderful epitaph on his memory.
Well, so that's the K-12 education system. We see what condition it is in today. We see that across the board, across the K-12 education system, we have educators who are far more interested in teaching our kindergartners about sex than about actually teaching them colors, numbers, words, things kindergartners learn. And that whole thing ripples through the K-12 education system. I have students who are in my classes, in my Econ 250 class, which is Principles of Macroeconomics, who don't read at a 12th grade level. They're lucky if they're reading at a 5th grade level.
Oh my God.
And the books that I'm using are written at a 9th grade level. So the book is already 4 grades above where they can read.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, so now if we get into my comparative economic systems class, which is where I use Ayn Rand and Hayek and Mises and Cleon Skousen. Skousen's book, The 5,000 Year Leap, is written for a 6th grader. So most of my students get that book. But if you look at Atlas Shrugged, 1,070 pages of really high level thinking, along with high level words. Even I read it with a thesaurus next to me.
Sure.
And so we get a population of students coming into the university that are not prepared. I have students in my Econ 250 class, 18-year-olds, who are afraid of fractions because they've never been taught about fractions. They can't do long division by hand. They have not memorized their multiplication tables, not even up to 10. They have to do it on a calculator. If I show them a fraction of 1/4 and 1/2, they have to sit there and try and picture a pie so they can picture how half a pie is bigger than a quarter of a pie.
My
Now you tell me how students who are so ill prepared for university are making it through university.
There's only one of two ways they're doing it. Either
Yeah.
A, it's taking them a whole lot longer than it otherwise should in a 4-year program, or
Right.
B, and
they're
this is
doing a
not
lot
true.
of cheating.
They're doing a lot of
They're doing
cheating.
a
A
lot
lot
of
of people
cheating.
letting them
These
slide
students who come
by.
into my classes are expert cheaters. And so I have designed my syllabi to make sure that cheating is very painful for them and time consuming.
Oh, wonderful! Now, for those for those of you who are just stopping by and you're hearing this part of the conversation, you're going, "What in the world did I just walk into?" Well, let me tell you. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm the Front Porch Conservative. This is Chatting on the Porch. I have Dr. Robin McCutcheon, professor of economics at Marshall University. And I got to say, from just the first little bit of a show that we've had here together in the conversation, I will bet you are a hit with the university's administration. I
No,
bet
I'm
they
not.
just love you.
They don't. I've been on their shit list for years.
How high up or how low down on the shit list are you?
Well, in the fall of 2021, when we came back from a year of virtual learning, on day one,
Okay.
my first class, 10 o'clock, I proceeded to let the students know that their mask was useless because because the fibers in their mask were so big that a virus, it would be like a chain link fence stopping a mosquito. I proceeded to have the students go out on the internet with their cell phones and find me how much money Pfizer was making, and it was in the 20 billion, 50 billion, almost $100 billion. And then I proceeded to tell them their, what shall we call those things?
Okay, folks. We discussed this backstage, so we're going to try and do this by way of
miming,
charades or miming. Okay,
there we go. That thing that everybody got.
That thing in the arm that has roosters. It rhymes with roosters. That thing. I think I know now what you're talking about. That jabby thingy. Okay,
right there you go.
The jabby thingy.
The jabberdoos.
Yeah, jabberdoos. Good word for it.
I had been doing a lot of research right from the get-go. And when Pfizer finally produced their summary of their 90 days of trials of the jabberdingy, and I downloaded the PDF of that document and I posted it for all my students, and then I showed them the 9 pages of side effects. And this is on day 1 of class. Now, unbeknownst to me, a student sitting in the class took umbrage with me bad-mouthing all of it.
I'm shocked. Totally shocked.
Astonished. And this student literally ran to the president's office. And the president called in. Now, it's not the current president, so don't get your feathers.
I know who you're talking about.
It was the last one.
I understand.
And the president called the provost into his office, who was the interim provost and my college's former dean. So I know him. And he called the provost into his office and said, "What the hell is McCutcheon doing? I thought you told me she was going to keep her mouth shut." And which I never did promise.
I understand.
And the provost called up the dean, who is also now gone. And he said, "What the hell is McCutcheon doing?" And the dean looked around his office for someone brave enough to come up and talk with me. And so I had an associate dean standing in my office 30 minutes after class ended, telling me that the university just doesn't want me talking about this stuff because it's so political. And I said, "I've got academic freedom. I don't give a shit what your administration wants." And she said, "Oh, but the university and I think she was having the vapors right in my office." And I finally looked at her and I said, "The university contracts and employs professors under the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, Title 133, Series 9, Academic Freedom. We are hired under this provision. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that the administration wants me to shut up? Are you telling me to shut up? Are you telling me to censor myself?" And she goes, "Oh, well, no, we're not really doing that, but you really have to stop talking about this." Really?
Well, that sounds like censorship.
That sounds like censorship to me, which I'm not going to do. And she says, "Well, you're not supposed to be talking about Pfizer. You're supposed to be talking about economics." And I said, "You need to go read Title 133, Section 2, which is all about academic freedom, which basically says I can say anything I want in my class. Anything. Anything."
Apparently, she didn't understand the meaning of the word anything.
I don't think so. And she says, well, I just don't know what we're going to do about you. And I said, "You're going to tell the president that I said to butt out." And she goes, "Oh, I couldn't do that." And I said, "Do you want me to go up there?" "I'd love to tell him. I got a minute. I can run right up there. She goes, no, that won't help. And I said, it'll help me. I'll feel a lot better.
Okay.
That was day one. That was a Monday. On Wednesday, I had the chair of my office, the chair of my department in my office giving me the same bullshit story. And I shouted at him for a while. Same script. And then on Friday, he was back in my office, only this time I didn't shout at him. I just took a lot of notes. He said, after he got done, blabbering on, and he finally looked at me and says, "You're not shouting at me." And I said, "No, I did that Wednesday. I'm taking notes now." He goes, "You're taking notes?" I said, "I'm documenting what you're saying, because you are this far from violating the settlement I have with the university, which says the university will uphold my academic freedom. So keep talking, buddy, because I'm going to get really rich when I sue you again. Because that foundation's got a lot of money, and I don't mind taking a couple million of it." Boop.
Needless to say, that seemed to end any controversy that.
No, it didn't, because the next week they were back again. I know.
Okay.
They're stupid. And the following week, a student actually posted a written complaint about me with academic affairs. So this is supposed to scare me. So academic affairs wanted me to explain how on earth I thought I could say whatever I wanted in my class. Guess how my email to them started? Marshall professors are hired and contracted under Title 133 of the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, Series 9, Academic Freedom. You all need to go read Section 2. Now, if this student doesn't like what I'm saying, they can drop the class. Or, since I have all of my lectures videotaped, they don't even have to come to class. They can just watch it online. I never heard back from them. I never heard back from the president or the provost or the dean or the associate dean or my chair. And that fall, I went up for promotion to full professor. Guess who was on the shit list? And I still got my promotion.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. So yeah, I've stomped on a lot of toes over in the hallowed halls.
Now I got to back up and ask you something that's kind of relates to someone on Rumble. And I'm looking at their name. It's WWG1 WGA Trump 1. That's their screen name. So I've never really come across them before. They just recently started following my channel on Rumble, and thank you very much. Glad to have you. You alluded to a previous lawsuit. Did I hear that correctly? Prior to that, do you mind if I ask you about it, or do you want to talk about it?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Right after I achieved my promotion to associate, and I earned my tenure.
Okay.
Back in, must have been spring of 2016.
All right.
The chair of the department stepped down, and a new chair stepped in. And this new chair, starting in the fall of 2016, found it convenient to stop at my office at least once a week and complain about how I was teaching.
Okay. This is interesting.
And it got to the point where I started every night or every morning. I would make notes. I would write it all down. I didn't know what to do about this. Yeah, okay, fine, I'm tenured, but I had no idea. I consulted with mature professors, senior professors. What do I do about this? And I had one professor, a friend of mine, his name is Dallas Brozick. He passed away in May 2021. And Dallas would look at me and he'd go, Tell him to shut the up. Just tell him to go fork himself. And I was like, I can't do that. That's he's the chair. And Dallas would look at me and say, he's a pile of shit. Go tell him to fork off. And then Dallas said, he can't tell you how to teach. And I said, but he's standing in my office telling me how to teach. And Dallas would go, this one's really stupid. She just doesn't get it. So he sent me Title 133 and he said, read this. Read this. And then he sent me pieces and parts of the Green Book. And then he just sent me the whole Green Book, which is the Marshall University. It's basically the book with all the university policies in it. Then he sent me all of the MU Board of Governors policies. He said, read this. The answer is in here. You have academic freedom. I think I am just stupid, because it took me until March of 2018. I kept reading and trying to ignore this bastard who kept, poking at me and getting to the point where he was harassing me. And finally, one night, it was literally the middle of the night, I had this dream, and I was standing in my classroom, and the door to my classroom was a force field, and nobody could get through it. Not the chair of the department, not any other professor, but the kids could walk in. And I was like, ooh, what does this mean? And I woke up thinking, oh my God, that's what academic freedom means. It means I can say anything I want and tell the administration to go fork off. So I started kind of arranging my thoughts, and I didn't say anything to anybody, and this chair kept coming in and haranguing. But at this point I'm going, this is harassment. Like,
oh yeah.
And so I start accumulating a message in my head. And on April the 13th, which happened to be a Friday, we had a big faculty to do a dinner.
Okay.
And this chair got up and started pounding on the podium about how we must do things as teachers. And that next morning, no, that was a Thursday. That was April the 12th. The next day, on Friday the 13th, I got an email from the secretary. All of the people who were teaching Econ 250 got an email from the secretary saying, you will be using this book, X book, whatever book it was. Now, that was the piece where he stepped over the line to tell me and mandate what textbook I would be using in my classroom. See, now he broke the law. Before, he was just harassing me. So Saturday morning, I'm pounding out this message that's in my brain, right, of how my academic freedom has been violated. And I had the laws from West Virginia Constitution. I had the particular sections from the MU Green Book. I had the particular policies from the MU BOG, Board of Governors, and I had the Title 133, and I crafted a grievance. I wordsmithed it, and my husband and I spent all of Saturday and a good chunk of Sunday wordsmithing this grievance. And Monday morning, I took a copy into school, and I must have made a dozen copies of this grievance. Now, on the Marshall website, if you're writing a grievance, there's two places you have to send it. You have to send it to the president, and you have to send it to the director of HR. And then there's two other places over in Charleston where you could send it if you wanted to.
Why do
So
I have a feeling you sent it?
I sent it overnight mail where they had to sign for it to all 4 places.
Smart
And
move.
I said nothing to anybody. Not even my friend Dallas knew about this. This was Tuesday. On Thursday, I got a phone call from the dean, who is now provost. And the dean said, "I'd like you to come down to my office, please." So I said, "Okay." So I went down to his office, and he looked at me and he said, "I understand that you're suing the university." And I said, "No, I'm suing the chair of the department." He said, "Yeah, he's administration, so you're suing the university." And I digested that for about a nanosecond, and I went, "Yep, I'm suing the university." He goes, "Wait a minute. You could tell he wanted me to be afraid."
He was
But
trying
see,
to bluff you.
I had so much ammunition that I was not backing down. I said, "Yep, I'm suing the university." He goes, well, this isn't going to go anywhere." And I looked at him and I said, "You want to bet?" You see, I kept emailing you since you showed up on campus about this chair, and I kept begging you,
Do something about it.
and the associate dean, to do something about it, and you didn't. And your name is all through my grievance. So my recommendation to you is you get the fuck out of my way and you let me sue the university. I like you. I think you're a nice guy. I think you're actually pretty good for our college. But if you get in my way, I will rip you to pieces. And I walked out of his office. And then on the next day, I told his associate dean the same thing. And by the next week on, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday, I started getting these email from someone who, I don't want to name her, but
Okay.
she was the former Title IX director. That'll give you an idea of who it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Saying, "We need to meet.
I'll bet we do.
We've got this grievance," and I ignored it. I didn't know what to say to her. As far as I know, didn't have anything to do with Title IX. But you see, she read the grievance, and because of who the chair was, she assumed the grievance was all about racism. That's how she got a hold of it. It didn't have anything to do with racism. It's incidental, the color of people's skin. That didn't have anything to do with it. So I ignored it. And then I got another email like Tuesday night, and then Wednesday morning, and then Wednesday afternoon. And pretty soon she's calling my office, and I'm just ignoring it. So I go over to my friend Dallas, who I had emailed a copy of the grievance to. And he told me I had graduated from grasshopper to master. And I said, "I don't know what to do about this." He goes, "Tell him what you want." And I said, "Well, I want the chair's head on a platter, but I don't think I'm going to get that." He said, "Tell him what you want." And so I finally emailed her back. This poor woman's been sweating balls for a week because I won't answer her. And I emailed her back and I said, "I just want the university to support my academic freedom." And she wrote back and she said, "Well, the university says you can use any textbook you want." So I wrote back to her. I said, "Oh no, this is way beyond a textbook now, lady. Way beyond. Totally beyond. I want you to support my academic freedom, like it says in the policy, like it says in the West Virginia Constitution. That's what I want." Now, strange how things work. In the fall, so I did actually get the settlement. They tripped over themselves to write the settlement, and get it all laid out and make me go away.
Mm-hmm.
The fall of 2018, I get my contract, and I'm reading the paragraph where it says, you are contracted and hired under Title 133 of the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, Series 9, Academic Freedom. And I went, oh my God, this is this new? So I went back and I looked at all my other contracts. No, it's right there in front of my face. So I pulled a fast one. We hired 3 or 4 new professors in the summer of 2018. I sent each of them a copy of my grievance. And those young professors, they know exactly how it works now. They don't stand for any shit from anyone.
Okay, very good. I have not heard
that was the story. Yeah, when the dean pulled me into his office, I think his exact words were, I just got an email from this lady, the former title, and she says your grievance is all about racism. I was like, no, it doesn't really have anything to do with racism. Better read it. Have you read it? He goes, well, no. I said, do you want a copy of it? He goes, are you allowed to do that? And I said, well, I made a dozen copies. Sure, I'll give you one. He goes, and he looks at his computer and he goes, no, it looks like she sent me an electronic copy. I said, oh, good. I suggest you read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not pleasant to him. He came back around to me in January of 2019, and he said, we have a student in your Econ 250 class, and he's related to a very moneyed donor.
Uh-oh.
And he doesn't like what you're talking about in class. And I said, oh, that poor little snowflake. Well, you just tell him I'll get my blowtorch out. He goes, what? And I said, tell him I said to suck an egg.
She said with a diplomatic smile on her face, ladies and gentlemen.
I said, I have a settlement with the university. You actually have a copy of that settlement in my personnel file right there in your file drawer. That says you can't tell me what to say. Your donors can't tell me what to say. Nobody on this planet can tell me what to say. So you tell that donor, if they don't like it, maybe they should get their family member out of my class. He goes, I don't know. I mean, it's a very moneyed donor. I said, I don't give a flying rat's tail. I said something different. I was not diplomatic.
I understand.
And I said, I don't care. He goes, well, I really don't know what to say. Could you call them? I said, no, that's your job.
Yeah.
You call them. Do you need me to write down what to say? He goes, no. I said, have a nice day.
And for those of you who are watching and wondering, just
what the hell is this?
Or no, well, actually, I'm saying for those of you who are watching and maybe you're not familiar with how West Virginians or those who have lived in West Virginia for a long time talk to people, here's a real good example of why we're known as a fairly plain-spoken bunch.
I love West Virginians. I really do. I felt like I fit right in, even though my accent is not West Virginian, and it probably never will be. But
that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I West Virginians are the kind of people that will give you the shirt off their back.
Yes.
Even if they meant they were walking around naked from the waist up. They're just that kind of people. Good, hardworking.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But one of my favorite people was the secretary who has now moved up into the university, and I actually got to hire her, and she told me once. She said, "Robin, just a little hint. West Virginians are the nicest people on earth, but do not mistake their kindness for weakness.
Amen.
And I said,
Amen.
ooh, that sounds like sage advice. I thank you. I will take that.
That is absolutely true. Absolutely true.
That's right.
And yep, and for those who, like I said, who are stopping by, I'm Brian Trippett on the Front Porch Conservative. This is Dr. Robin McCutcheon, professor of economics at Marsh University. I got a couple of questions from the audience, then we're going to bring it back into some other things we had talked about, or
reduce the
topics we were.
fire a little bit.
Well, no, I don't mind the fire. I'm perfectly fine. I told you before you ever came on, I was like, say whatever you want. I don't care. You know the rules of YouTube. I mean,
I
but
don't really.
well, one of my favorite people, Christian Watson, who is himself a content creator, who I affectionately refer to as the professor, ask her what she thinks a progressive professor who has abused academic freedom, similar to what Buckley talked about in God and Man at Yale. Any thoughts on this?
I've never heard what Buckley said about God and Man at Yale, but I can.
His seminal book from the 50s, yeah.
Okay, I can say that this whole idea of academic freedom was born out of the late 1890s when professors from universities like Yale and Harvard and Princeton were heading over to Europe, to the continent, to get cultured. And they started bringing back Marxist ideology. They started hanging out in the cafes in Paris, and Marxism was all the rage in the 1880s and 1890s. And these professors from American universities would go over there and bring Marxist ideology back, and they would be teaching it. Well, the majority of our universities in the late that were founded in the 1800s or the 1700s were founded by Christian churches. Yep. And it was the parishioners that were funding those colleges and universities. And so, and it was very, you would not even recognize it. Those universities were very pro-American, as you can probably imagine.
Absolutely.
So they get these Harvard and Yale and Princeton professors coming back from the continent, bringing communism, and they started teaching it in the universities. And so universities would fire these professors because they were speaking anti-American garbage. Well, the professors got together around 1911, and by 1915, they had formed their own union. I think it's the American Association of University Professors, the AAUP.
I think I've heard of it.
And they wrote a statement, which they called the document or the declaration, which was a declaration of academic freedom, where they were leaning on the First Amendment of the United States, freedom of speech.
Sure.
And so, and they started at Harvard and Yale and Princeton. They got this pushed through as policy. And then one of their professors got fired. And he took the university to court for violating not just the policy of academic freedom, but for violating his First Amendment right to speak freely. And he won.
Your situation in reverse.
Exactly. And so university professors, because they were tenured, would start looking for other people who were like them. Communists in disguise is what I usually call it. And they would hire these people. And so what you get over the course of, what is that, almost 110 years now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From 1915, what you get is a situation where on campus, out of 100 professors, 2 of them are pro-American, and all the other 98 are not. I mean, look at the makeup of professors on pick any campus.
Mm-hmm.
When that Jabberdo thingy went rolling around in 2021, I can almost guarantee you I was the only professor on campus screaming at the top of my lungs at the president and the then chief counsel. You know who those were?
Yep.
I sent them an email when I heard that the faculty senate was going to demand that the president mandate the Jabberwocky thing across campus. I sent those 2 gentlemen an email, and I told them how many federal laws they would be violating, including the Nuremberg Code.
Yeah.
which was on Marshall's website.
Yep.
And that whole thing just quietly went away. But the petition that was sent around that was started by somebody on faculty senate had hundreds of names on it. It didn't have my name on it. I think I'll bet you anything I was the only person who didn't sign it. And the faculty senate was so pissed because the university president at the time refused to mandate the jabberwocky thingy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So my situation in reverse.
Yeah.
From 110 years ago. Professors all across the country for 110 years have been pulling in people just like them with the same leftist, communist, socialist ideology. And it's only by the grace of God that I snuck through all the cracks. Of course, my friend Dallas had taught me you have to read policy, you have to understand how it impacts you and how it impacts the college and the university. So I became a policy wonk.
And that has more than one
Saved my
occasion.
ass. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I don't know what Buckley said. I don't know what kind of research he did, but from my own research, I know that this is how the university system got to be a communist system from the top down. Through academic freedom, through leftist communist professors pushing it through as policy in every university across the country. I have had situations where I don't know if you remember, but there was a guy up at downriver at Shawnee State that got fired for I think he refused to use somebody's pronoun. I can't remember exactly.
I think I remember this.
And I saw this news, so I looked him up online. I looked up his university. I researched his policy, and I sent him his own university's policy on academic freedom. And I told him in the email, I said, your university violated their own policy, which also violated your First Amendment. You need to take them to court, and this is how you win. And he did. And then he won.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And then he got his job back.
That's awesome.
So every university, I can't think of any university in the United States that doesn't have a policy of academic freedom. And some universities, like University of Michigan, will violate that policy left, right, and center, and nobody holds their feet to the fire.
Because no one realizes it's there.
And nobody knows how to use policy as a weapon.
Yeah.
Except
if you're a leftist. If you're a leftist, you know how to do it.
Some of them do, but apparently this particular art is lost because, holy smokes. Although, you can cut a wide path when you're a hurricane, a gale force 11 hurricane, and you are not willing to stop.
Absolutely.
And I'm not willing to stop.
Absolutely. Well, I have another question. Then we'll get back to a number of things. This is from a good friend of mine, Ruben Christopher Haynes. He's looking for access to a university to do deep research. Which schools in what he calls red states, when I don't disagree with his terminology, do you recommend for socioeconomics, data science, advanced mathematics? He says, I'm ready to go. So any recommendations?
Wow, that's a good question. Could you put that question back up on the screen again for me, please?
There you go. Yeah.
Access to a university for deep research. So please ask Ruben, is he looking for library access or database access?
I think database access, and maybe even working in a university somewhere, because he's got a lot of different information. And if that's a question you want to let marinate around, I'll email it to you, and then you can forward it back to me. He says both.
Oh, both. Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to marinate on that one, and just shoot me an answer, or if you want to answer right now, that's perfectly fine too.
Well, I may want to let it run around through my brain for a little bit, but just off the top of my head, if you have the credentials to be hired at a university, if not as a professor, but as an adjunct or an instructor. And a lot of universities are doing that, right? Because that Jabberwocky thingy took out a whole bunch of professors.
Oh yeah.
So that would be one thing to consider. You may want to think about volunteering. Pick out a college, go volunteer, teach a class voluntarily. They might actually ask you to hire on as an adjunct. And I've known several professors who are now tenured that's how they started. They started volunteering and then they got hired as an adjunct. And then pretty soon they were hired in as a tenure track assistant professor.
Okay.
As far as databases go, I don't actually know which university would have the best database.
Okay.
You might be better served just using the internet.
Okay.
Because I actually don't know the answer to that. Socioeconomics, data science, advanced mathematics. But if you can get connected to a university, one of the there are two databases for journals that you could look at. One would be ERIC, ERIC.
Okay.
ERIC. I don't remember what the acronym stands for. And
Okay.
the other one is JSTOR, JSTOR.
Okay.
And math departments will have their own set of journals that you can dive down into.
Okay.
But I think that if you go out on the internet, you may be able to access those two journal repositories from the internet without having to get connected to a university.
Okay. All right. And like I say, I'll shoot you this same question in an email, and if you happen to think of what states that would be a good place for him to look at, let me know, because Ruben is I say this as a friend, and I also say this as a professional. Ruben is an extremely credentialed individual. He'd be fabulous in a classroom somewhere. So if you happen to think of a good state for him to go to, let me know. I'll shoot it to him.
Wherever he is, that's a good place to start, because it's always, I think sometimes it's better to maybe just dip a toe in the water and see what's going on there.
Okay.
But connections across the internet certainly can help direct your footpath to where you need to be.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, and let's shift it back to something I definitely want to ask you about. And one of my up in Connecticut who's here tonight in chat on YouTube is wanting me to ask about this, which I was gonna do anyway. The state of the current economy. I am frustrated beyond all imagination for any number of reasons when it comes to economic data right now. And I'll tell you why. I got the New York Times, the Washington Post, the White House telling me everything's great. Inflation's coming down. Gas prices are coming down. The price of the 30-year mortgage is coming down. You know, we got GDP growth all over the place. We had 5% in this particular quarter, yada, yada, yada. And then there's my lying eyes that I look at everything with that says I'm still paying too much for gasoline. I'm still paying more for food. I'm still paying more for every other service that's related to gas and food. I mean, and you've studied this stuff on a macro and a micro level. What is the current state of the national economy right now? Is it as good as the White House is trying to tell us? Or are we, the citizens, right that something is wrong and everything costs too much?
I think the best place to start with this one is, I'm going to make a statement, and
Go ahead.
then I'm gonna back it up.
All right.
They lie about everything. The White House, the press, the media. They lie about everything. I don't know why anybody would believe the Washington Post and the New York Times or the White House. Why on earth? I mean, if they actually told you, look, we've actually been in a recession since the summer of 2021, how on earth is that potato going to get reelected, even if he is sitting in his basement?
Well, all right, now hang on though.
Okay, so your lying eyes.
Okay.
on January the 21st, I made a point of driving down Fifth Avenue. Well, it's only one way to go. I was driving down Fifth Avenue. So for people who are not from Huntington, Fifth Avenue only goes east. I was driving east because I wanted to go past the gas station at 20th Street, which is or close to 20th Street, which is a Sheetz, and I wanted to get down by the Kroger, which has their own gas station. And the gasoline on January the 21st, 2021 at the Kroger was $1.87 a gallon. $1.87. $1.87.
January 21st of what year?
2021.
Okay.
Almost 3 years ago. And the last time I was over there, gasoline, and this was this last week, it was $2.89 ish. Okay. So it's still $1 higher, which if you take a percent increase, if you're looking at the percentage increase, it's still, what is that, like 70% higher? At
least.
So gasoline, the really interesting thing about economics is the economy is a system. You can think of it as an ecosystem. Every piece is connected to every other piece. If you thought of, we have a lot of farmers around here, and they depend on sun and rain.
Right.
That sun is the energy that the plants use to grow, right? And the rain gives them nourishment to continue growing. But without the sun, the plants do not grow. So gasoline is the gas in our economic engine. And when the price of gasoline starts to hike up, what that does is it creates a ripple effect in the economy where every other item that is connected to gasoline, that price goes up as well. So the price of our gasoline, car gasoline goes up. The price of diesel gasoline goes up. Everything that is shipped to grocery stores or Walmart's or Kroger's or any store is shipped by truck, which uses diesel. Now, when the price of diesel starts going up, all those stores have to pay a higher price to get their goods. Now, the store pays a higher price. Guess who else is going to pay a higher price?
The consumer.
We are. The consumer is. And so as the price of gasoline goes up, that sends out that rippling effect throughout the economy. All the other prices are going to go up. All of them. So, yeah, Krugman he's just an idiot. I don't know.
Maybe don't hold back. Tell me what you really think of the guy.
Maybe he makes millions of dollars as a contributor to the New York Times, but there hasn't been a sane word out of that man's mouth for 40 years. He has been a communist jerk since the beginning. Is that clear enough, Krugman?
I'm still having trouble understanding what you're saying. I just wish you'd be more plain about it, daggone.
Oh, well, I can get more plain.
I'm just kidding.
Any more plain, and I'd be spiky. I'm so prickly.
I've told people all the time, if I invite you on my electronic front porch, you are at liberty to say anything you want. The only thing you got to do is be respectful to everybody doing it, and past that, I don't care what you say. The only reasons that I get nervous is because of these people that run YouTube that are all just all, oh my gosh, she said what? It's like right. Exactly, get a case of the vapors.
Right. Let me continue just a little bit because it's not just the price of gasoline.
Okay.
The banking system that we have is run by the Federal Reserve System, which is monopoly control of the money supply.
Okay.
Now, didn't we learn that monopolies are bad?
I always was taught that.
Right? Monopolies are bad. So how come nobody's complaining about the monopoly ownership of the money supply by the Federal Reserve? So what did the Federal Reserve do? I'm not going to go all the way back into history, but let me just go back to 1999.
Okay.
Now, in 1999, The Glass-Steagall Act of 1934 was overturned. The Glass-Steagall Act of 1934 was the act that told banks you cannot take the money from your depositors and play in the market. Okay, that was the act. It basically separated the banking system into the brokerage house system and banks. So you had commercial banks and you had private banks, individual banks, and that was Glass-Steagall. So if you're West Banco, I don't know, down on 9th Avenue, if your West Banco has all of your deposits, it can't take the amount of the deposits that it cannot loan and go into the market and buy stocks. It can't do that up till 1999.
And then the federal government gave them the license to do it.
And after 1999, the federal government overturned Glass-Steagall, and now we have a situation where banks can, I mean, we had the Franken-Dodd bill. Okay, it's the Dodd-Frank bill, but I call it the Franken-Dodd bill of 2009, that basically said if a bank is having trouble, it can do a bail-in where it takes all of the deposits for its own self. Now, I don't know about you, but when I deposit my money in a bank, I got this weird notion that that's still my money.
Funny, I feel the same way.
How do you think the people of Huntington would feel if West Banco suddenly bailed itself in of all of everybody's deposits?
Or people who bank at JP Morgan Chase in New York or California or Texas or Florida or anywhere else found out the same thing.
Right. There you go. Well, this could be, I'm not going to say it is coming, but it could be coming. So in 1999, Glass-Steagall is overturned. And in order to make money, to make money, more money, banks started taking their loans that they would take the market value of the loan of, say, mortgages, and they would package these mortgages up together. It's called a mortgage-backed security, and they would sell it out into the market. And they would package these things up in billion-dollar packages, sell them out into the market. And the market, whatever brokerage house they sold it to, they would take that package all apart and then combine it with other packages and sell it out into the market again. And then the next place that got it would take it all apart, packages it up, and sell it out over and over and over and over and over until these things were being sold literally around the world. Now, every one of these mortgage-backed securities or collateralized debt obligations, every single one would go through, it would go through a kind of a rate check to make sure that the mortgages inside of that package were A+ or A. So in other words, the bank had given that loan because they were sure they were going to be paid back. So, right, you make a mortgage payment, the bank has checked you all out, and they say, yep, Brian's good. This is an A+ mortgage because we know he has the money to pay back. And then if you can't pay back, the bank takes the house, right?
Right.
But at the same time Glass-Steagall was overturned, President Clinton did kind of a cool thing. He said, we should make it, and actually this goes back to President Jimmy Carter, but Clinton really kind of put the pedal to the metal.
Gear. I think I know
kicked
exactly
it in a high gear. He says, we should make it so that people who aren't really creditworthy can still borrow money for a house. Now, when Jimmy Carter did this, he said the bank had to have 5% of their loanable funds that would go to people who weren't really creditworthy. Clinton kicked that one up to like 15 or 20%. And then Baby Bush put it at 35% in 2003 or 4. So what you have is you have a larger portion of that bundle that was loaned to uncreditworthy borrowers. And so this bundle that goes out into the market that then gets reshifted and repackaged and sent to. Nobody knows who's got what mortgage. Okay. In the meantime, Ben Bernanke, who's another one of those Princeton idiots, macroeconomist extraordinaire, asshole, he starts hiking the interest rates up. Now, what this does is the Federal Reserve has an interest rate. It's called the federal funds rate.
Federal funds rate, yeah.
It is the rate that the Federal Reserve tells banks how much interest they can pay each other. The discount rate is the rate that the Federal Reserve charges these banks if they go to the Federal Reserve to borrow money. So the Federal Reserve in about 2003 or 4 starts very gently hiking up the interest rate. And I probably should put that on Alan Greenspan, because I think he didn't get out of there until 2006. But they were tiny little hikes, really, slivers, 0.25%, hardly noticeable. Ben Bernanke gets in there in February of 2006, and it's like bump, bump, bump. Now, the thing about these interest rates, the banks are telling each other how much this interest rate is what the bank has to charge each other for borrowing money.
Right.
That interest rate is not felt out in the economy for about 3.5 or 4 years.
Right.
So 2006. By 2007, the commercial real estate market starts taking a tumble because banks are now charging, banks first charge commercial real estate higher interest rates. And then they start charging mortgage rates higher interest rates. And then it's both together, they're charging higher interest rates. So 2006, by the spring of 2007, I was still in Michigan. We were driving around our little town, our big town. And I start seeing for lease. It was, and they were all yellow and black signs, so it looked like dandelions popping up all up and down the big roads. For lease, all on commercial buildings. And I went, oh crap.
Yep, here it comes.
So my family was in real estate in 1927 when the same thing happened. My family knows that when these commercial real estate buildings start getting leased, and then within a year and a half, the mortgage market starts to crash, we're headed for a depression. So 2 years from 2007, we're summer of 2008. What else happens? Price of gasoline goes from $1.25 to $4.25 a gallon. I had a friend in that spring 2008. He worked for Chrysler. He was a data analyst for Chrysler. And I pulled him aside and I said, Jonathan, price of gasoline's going up. Wholesale prices, at that point, the wholesale price was like $111-ish a barrel. I said,
yep.
What the hell is Chrysler doing? He says, we're really worried because we've got 60 days of cars on the lots, the wholesale lots that hold the cars before they go to the dealers.
Sure.
I said, 60 days, that sounds like a lot. He said, it's 4 weeks longer than we like. That was the middle of April. By the middle of May, I pulled him back aside. I said, all right, what's the car lots look like? He goes, we're at 120 days. I was like, oh, shit. He goes, yeah, everybody's panicking. They're not sure what to do. Gas prices are going up. I said, duck? He goes, yeah, duck. And that was 2 months before gas prices hit $4.25 a gallon.
Oh, man.
So the car dealers know what's coming, right? The GM and Ford just canceled their electric vehicle production wholesale. Now, interesting side note, I taught at Oakland University starting in the fall of 2006, and I had a student in my night class who worked for GM on the Bolt battery production. I said, "How's that going?" He said, "I'm getting a degree in something that GM is not connected with." I said, "Why ever would you do that?" He said, "Because GM can't figure out how to keep the Bolt batteries from bursting into flame." Now, that was 2006.
It's 17 years later, and they're now canceling wholesale production of all these EVs. They still can't figure out their problem then.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I got something else for you. I just
All right.
found this on the Conservative Treehouse, dated today. It says half of all U.S. Buick dealerships take the GM buyout instead of spending millions retooling to meet electric vehicle needs. Buick dealers are going out of business because they will not spend the money to be a Buick dealer. Half.
They know what's coming.
They know what's coming.
Oh,
They know what's coming.
Let me go ahead.
So there are 2,000 Buick dealers. That means 1,000 of them are not going to be selling or repairing Buick cars. Now, if you really wanted to screw over a country and keep the country's citizens from moving freely about the country, how would you do it?
Take away their ability to do so by taking away their vehicles.
Take away their cars.
Yep.
Well, old Klaus Schwab, he doesn't want you to have a car anyway. He wants you to live in a 15-minute concentration camp. I mean, city, like Cleveland.
Yeah,
he doesn't want you moving freely about the country.
Absolutely not.
He doesn't even want you moving freely about the city.
Exactly. So, folks,
so do you see how we only have to go back to 2008 to see what's going to happen coming up in 2024, right?
Yeah, and I'm just about to get to that. So, for those of you who are dropping by, be it on Rumble, on YouTube, on Twitter, my name's Brian Trippett. On the Front Porch Conservative, this is Dr. Robin McCutcheon, professor of economics at Marshall University. You touched on something a moment ago, and you said, well, two things. You said that all we've got to do is look back to 2008 to see what's coming in 2024. Let me lay this out and tell me if I'm interpreting this wrong. I'm seeing headlines about commercial real estate markets in New York City, Chicago, LA, and other major metropolitan cities around the country, and there's worry inside the banks that the owners of these buildings cannot make the payments to the banks. Why? Because no one is renting office space anymore, and now that's starting to come due. You've got student loan defaults that are starting to go up. Why? Because we kept student loan payments at bay during the pandemic. Now they're being required to repay those monies. They don't have the jobs or the monies to repay them. There's that stewing in the mix. You've got interest rate going. You got massive. Oh, did it freeze?
Yeah, do that last piece. I heard about the student loans. Do the next piece.
Yeah, you've got student loans out there where students can't pay the money back, and now the default rates are starting to go up. You've got spending at massive levels by the federal government, just chewing up whatever liquidity is out in the market. You've got the feds doing whatever the feds do in this situation, which is raise interest rates and choke off liquidity. Am I interpreting this wrong? We are headed for one hell of a financial disaster.
Oh, yeah. Yep, you got it.
When does this hit? In your estimation?
January the 1st. Now, let me tell you why.
Okay.
Okay. Have you heard of the BRICS countries? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yes.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yes.
Okay. So you've heard of Russia and China.
Right.
Russia and China I want to say it was like 2004 or 2005, made a deal with each other that they were going to find a way to trade goods and services between their two countries without using the US dollar.
Right.
Now, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency because it is the currency that every country exchanges into in order to get another country's currency.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It
So
does.
if somebody from the United States wanted to buy oil from France, I don't know why, I'm just making this up.
Okay.
Somebody from the United States wanted to buy oil from France, and the oil is priced in US dollars. In order to buy the oil from France, you have to trade your US dollars into euro to give to the company to pay for the oil, right?
Right. Right.
Okay. So so up until August 15th, 2022, our dollar was backed by petroleum. It was called the petrodollar.
Right.
It was backed by petroleum since 1971 when President Nixon took us off the gold standard. He closed the gold window temporarily because people were manipulating the market, and they immediately then transferred that to oil deals with OPEC and Saudi Arabia, those Middle Eastern countries, and all oil sold all over the world from those countries were priced in US dollars. So our dollar was backed by oil. Okay.
Okay.
Starting in August of 2022, when the potato took us out of Afghanistan, all of those countries decided they would use other currencies, not the US dollar, to buy and trade their oil. And they started with China, who has this deal with Russia to use Russian ruble and Chinese yuan to trade with each other. All the way back in 2004 or 2005. Still with
Okay.
me?
Yeah.
Now, what else happened in 2022? Go way back. February, say, just after Valentine's Day. Wasn't that when the Ukraine skirmish started?
Oh, yes. Yes. The Russian war with Ukraine. That's correct.
And on February the 24th, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, backed the Russian ruble with gold.
I remember that.
5,000 rubles would buy you a gram of gold. And then in the first week of March, like a week later, he told all the Russian citizens that he was removing all taxes from gold and silver, and he asked his people to go out and buy as much gold and silver as they could.
I remember that.
So then President Xi Jinping did the same with his people in China. Are you sensing a trend
Pattern
here?
here. Yeah. Yeah.
And then President Modi from India did the same. Well, the Indians, I mean, they're all about gold and silver, but mostly gold. But President Modi of India did the same thing. You see the pattern here, right? Okay. So Russia and China, when they make this deal together way back, I'm looking at this and going, what the hell are they doing? Now I kind of got it figured out because they invited Brazil, India, South Africa, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They invited the BRICS countries by 2015 to join them. And they started having their own get-togethers. And they started talking about building their own banking system where they would have their own development bank. And it would be for third world countries. And they would all use their own currency, and each country's currency would be backed by gold or silver, some other asset, whatever they're rich in.
Right.
And And then this last summer, in August, they had a get together in South Africa.
Durban, South Africa. I remember this.
They had a get together. And it wasn't just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was those 5 and 40 other countries that decided, we're going to look at this. We might want to go this way. Now, right at the end of February 2022, let me just take a slight hop backwards.
Okay.
Do you remember what the potato did to Russia at the end of February 2022?
Economic sanctions, if I recall correctly, on any number of different commodities.
Right.
Commodity
and
sanctions.
They kicked Russia off the SWIFT system.
And froze assets here in the U.S., yeah.
If there were any left. I don't think there were, but whatever. The SWIFT system is a communication system where central banks communicate with each other. It's also used for transferring money internationally. So the potato kicks Russia off the SWIFT system, and then Russia and China put into high gear this new BRICS banking system where they have their own development bank. They have their own way that they're going to be trading with each other for goods. And you will not be surprised to hear, let me see. I've got it right here. I really do. Where is it? Oh, right on the bottom of the pile. The UAE decided that they would not use the US dollar to sell their oil to anyone. I got it here. I really do. I got a stack of stuff.
While you're looking for
it, here it is. Okay. I got it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
UAE stops using US dollars for oil trades, December 11th. Now, why is this important? Because it's not just Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now it's those 5 plus 40 more. And if these countries are not going to be buying US dollars to use in trade, doesn't that make our currency worthless?
I was going to say,
less?
We're going to have physical currency without it being traded, nothing backing it, because, for various reasons, these 40 countries, 45 plus countries don't want to use it to purchase oil. If oil is what backs the US dollar, we're going to be holding a whole bunch of physical currency. My God, this is Weimar Republic time. Where a wheelbarrow full of cash buys you a loaf of bread.
I said January the 1st, right?
Yep.
January the 1st is when the BRICS 5 becomes BRICS 11. There are six other of the biggest oil producing countries in the world that are joining the BRICS. So it'll be BRICS 11. And none of them are going to be using US dollars, which also means that they're not going to be using our US Treasury notes to back up their currency. So they'll be dumping US Treasury notes. And all of this starts on January the 1st.
Oh my God.
That's why I said January the 1st. Now, back in a year ago, fall of 2022, out on the West Coast, Long Beach and San Diego, there were hundreds of cargo ships, container ships that were waiting to be offloaded.
Yeah,
I looked just maybe not even a week ago. There's barely a dozen. Now, we get a lot of our stuff from overseas, and a good chunk of it comes into Long Beach. Some goes into ports on the Gulf of Mexico, and some go up on ports on the Atlantic Ocean. But those ports are not very full either. So what if, I'm just saying, what if some of these countries, Asian countries, have already started not using US dollars or US Treasury notes to buy our goods and services? And so when they send their container ships to us, they want gold, silver, oil, but not US dollars and not US Treasuries.
And if we can't pay them with that, they're not going to bring their goods over here.
Why send a container ship all across the ocean if you know you're not even going to get paid?
Oh my God.
Do you see why I say January 1st?
Yeah.
Now, it's worse. It really is worse. I wish it was better, but it's not. The U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve this year coming in 2024 has $7 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced.
I've heard about, yeah.
Yeah, so this is debt that is coming mature. So it's got to be, the way the Federal Reserve and the government has done it is the government borrows money, the Federal Reserve sells some kind of a treasury, a 10-year, a 30-year treasury out onto the market. But when that due date comes, they don't have the cash money to pay it back, so they borrow some more. And then they put it out on the market. When it comes due, they borrow some more. They put it out on the market, borrow some more, put it out on the market, borrow some more, put it. For 110 years, Brian, we've got $7 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced by selling more treasuries that no country is going to buy. In addition to that, we've got another $2 trillion of current debt, stuff we just spent, that we have to sell out onto the market to people who aren't buying. Now, here's the rub. If the Federal Reserve and the Treasury can't find anybody, any sucker to buy U.S. debt, there are 17 primary dealer banks, the 17 biggest banks in the country, that are obligated and contracted to buy this debt.
Okay.
Where are they going to get the money? Can you
and
imagine?
You.
Well, outside of bail-ins, which isn't going to last very long, right?
No.
That would go over once.
Yeah.
Outside of bail-ins, can you imagine the Treasury or the Fed printing trillions of dollars, sliding it over to the banks and saying, here you go, just give it back. We'll sell you the treasuries.
They're going to hyperinflate the value of the dollar.
They're going to crash the dollar. It's not going to be on Monday, the 1st of January, but that's
by some point in 2024.
Yeah. So BRICS 11 is going to very quickly become BRICS everybody but us. You know, I think the European Union, maybe Great Britain, surely Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, us 6, will be the only ones left out. Now, who is going to use the US dollar when it's worthless? Well and truly worthless? Nobody. So take your worthless US dollars and go buy you some gold, or go buy you some silver, go out and buy you some junk silver. I like toilet paper. I think toilet paper is so cool. Yeah, because when the shit hits the fan, you're still going to have to take a crap. Probably a big one.
And we'll all be crapping when we realize what's getting ready to happen in 2024. Let me ask you this to play the role of hopeful optimist.
Okay.
Is this situation, I know it can't be avoided, can its effects be mitigated?
Oh yeah. Let me tell you some good news.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually do have some good news. Yeah, let's try some good news.
Okay.
Well, let me start with 3 big states.
Okay.
Texas, way back in, I think it was way back in 2008, demanded its $1 billion in gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. This was way back.
Okay.
Texas then passed laws to build and run a sovereign gold bullion bank, which means Texas is about to become independent from underneath the Federal Reserve. Tennessee, a year ago in December, passed legislation to also build their own sovereign gold bullion bank. And since a year ago, there have been at least 23 states that have bills pending or already passed that are recognizing gold and silver as legal tender. And they are Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, New Jersey, Oregon, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. Yeah, well, Ohio couldn't even do it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but they've got Governor Dewey over there. What do you expect?
Well, okay. I will grant you that. Now, there's a caveat to some of these bills. Some of these bills say that you have to use, it's called specie, which gold and silver and the coin are called specie. So you have to use specie minted by the U.S. Mint. So if you went to, I don't know, you got a Canadian coin, some silver minter up in, I don't know, Alberta. I'm making this up. Okay. And they send you a coin with Santa Claus on it. And it says 0.9999 silver. That would not be a U.S. Mint coin. But can you imagine a situation where who gives a flying rat's tail if you've got, U.S. Mint coins or just an ounce of silver?
Okay.
Right. So Florida then, they went a step further and they just passed, they've got a couple of bills on the table that aims to recognize specie legal tender as money within the state where it's any mint, could be from Nevada.
Okay.
So that's going to go around. There are 43 states from the last year. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know there are 43 states that have removed all or some of the taxes on buying gold and silver. So these 23 or 25 states, what they're doing is they're removing themselves out from underneath the umbrella of the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
They're getting they're getting things set up under states' rights, Article 10 of the Bill of Rights, Article 10 of the Bill of Rights, states' rights, so that their citizens don't have to use a Federal Reserve note to pay their debts. They can use gold and silver.
Okay.
So so there's so what it means is those people who are prepared, who have seen the crap coming at them and got ready, they're going to be, they've mitigated some of this trauma. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah. So you won't be surprised to hear that I've been telling my students, I feel like I'm a fire hose. I've been telling my students every semester, get ready, it's coming, get your toilet paper, get you some canned goods, neighbor up. I've got several neighbors on my street that own chickens. And so I've, I kind of do some wheeling and dealing with biscuits and gravy because I make a mean gravy.
Yes, it's one. I think they used to joke about the state flour of West Virginia being a satellite dish. I can make an argument that state food. They say it's a pepperoni roll.
I don't think so.
No, it's gravy.
No. So here's another thing to keep an eye on.
Okay.
Just a couple of days ago, on the 18th, the London Metal Exchange, which is basically it is the place in the world up until a couple days ago that set the price of gold per ounce every day.
Okay.
At the open of trading in Britain.
All right.
London Metal Exchange is planning to launch new metals contracts using prices not in US dollars, but the Shanghai Futures Exchange, the yuan. They're not going to use US dollars. So the crap is coming, but it's not here today. And it's not going to, the tsunami is not going to hit on Monday, the 1st of January, but it's coming.
Right.
So, there are an awful lot of truthers out in the interwebs like you, Brian, that have been telling their people, get ready, it's coming. Get you some canned food, get you some storable food. And for God's sakes, don't give up your guns.
No, absolutely not.
Don't do that.
Absolutely.
That's a bad idea.
Let me
go ahead. No,
go ahead.
I was going to pour some more bad news on you, but we know this is coming because, look, haven't you heard about Bank of America has been having some trouble with its depositors? Depositors' deposits?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, on December the 14th, the 12 leading banks in the United States decided to halt their credit card services.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thought you'd like that.
They know what's coming.
So part of me, they know what's coming. Part of me, about a year ago, thought that we would be, at this time, we would be trying to get ourselves out from underneath a Federal Reserve's central bank digital currency, a CBDC. But I think things have moved so fast that even a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, especially one from the Fed, it's still going to be just as worthless as the paper, except I can't hold a CBDC in my hand. And the bank can shut it off if they don't like what I'm saying. Can you imagine them not liking what I say?
No, I couldn't possibly imagine them, because you're just probably on the A list for every invite to a cocktail party when it comes to matters like this. It's like,
I don't think so.
Can we get Robin to come over?
No. So I think the good news is that I think the good news for West Virginians is that they're pretty tough bunch of people. They've been through the shit.
Oh yeah.
They've been through a lot of crap, and they know how to take care of themselves and how to take care of their families. Yeah. And so I think states like West Virginia are going to be hit less hard. And then something I noticed, I went up to Detroit over Thanksgiving, and even though this economy really sucks, all the way through Toledo, from Huntington all the way through Toledo, all the way up, I lost count of the number of brand new housing communities that were popping up, brand new businesses. Oh my God. And all of a sudden it hit me. All those people from the blue states that are trying to escape, they're coming to the red states. So West Virginia and Ohio and Kentucky, well, I don't know about Kentucky, but West Virginia and Ohio may not be hit as bad, because if you have an influx of people coming into the state, they're bringing their income, they're bringing their kids, they're buying houses, they're renting places, they're buying cars. The local economies, I think might actually be doing better than, say, up by Pittsburgh or out at Philadelphia. Right. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. Yeah, it always, from a political standpoint, it always interests me. People are like, oh, they're going to turn our state. These people come from California and New York and Illinois. They're going to turn our states into something like they left. No, these are people that are escaping. They may not
Hopefully,
agree with you on everything, but they agree with you enough to realize, hey, I like the way you guys do it. Okay, there might be some stuff we don't see eye to eye on, but most everything you guys are about, we're about. We're just trying to get back to some measure of normalcy here, and
or
it's
sanity.
or sanity, one of the two. Um, all right, let me ask you
Yeah.
this: everybody can see this coming, okay? And this is one of the questions I wanted to get to.
Okay.
Everybody can see that. Everybody can see this coming, and I mean, it does. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
lay out the facts as you have. Why, in the name of God, is our Congress dithering around with everything they're dithering around, knowing damn full well $7 trillion of treasuries are going to be refinanced come January 1, and they're not lifting a damn finger to do a damn thing about it? Pardon my French.
That is a really good question. Why is Congress not doing anything? They know it's
Or,
coming.
or put it this way. I mean, I could make all kinds of arguments. The relief bills that we've done over the past 4 years, including the ones that the former president signed off on, you know, he bears as much blame in this as hyperinflating the dollar as the current occupant. You call him potato, I call him soft serve, which refers more to the condition of his brains than it does how he eats his ice cream. But laying aside our respective nicknames for the current occupant of the White House, you've got $7 trillion worth of debt that's coming. We've got a national debt of $33 trillion. This cannot go on in perpetuity. It's
Right.
impossible.
Right.
Why in the name of God are our national leaders not taking this more seriously and like, okay, guys, we got to cut spending? I mean, now, pre-COVID levels, that was still too much, but even get back to there, and we're at least mitigating what's about to happen.
Look, can I give you my hunch?
Go ahead.
Okay. When the Federal Reserve was instituted in 1913, it came packaged together with the Income Tax Act.
I remember.
So you got the Federal Reserve and you got the
Mm-hmm.
Income Tax Act.
Yep.
Those two together made us slaves.
Yeah.
We are all of us tax slaves. And the more we earn, the more we pay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only way to get rid of the Federal Reserve is for countries around the world to stop using the US dollar, to make the Federal Reserve go away. If you make the Federal Reserve go away, the income tax will go away. Now, if you don't.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a bone to pick about whether Congress was elected or selected, but
Okay.
leave that aside.
Okay.
Let's pretend that people in Congress want the Federal Reserve to go away too. To spend money. To spend money, print more money, make the dollar completely worthless, while at the same time, you've got 25 states, maybe more, that are making gold and silver legal tender, that are taking themselves out from underneath the clutches of the Federal Reserve. Because what's going on here, Brian, this whole entire tax slavery debt system, this is a money and banking, a fractional reserve central banking system that has been around since Babylon.
Yeah.
This is the Babylonian money system. And the only way to make it go away is to kill it by making sure countries around the world do not use our Federal Reserve note and make our US dollar so worthless that no one will ever buy our US treasuries. Ever. So that our country can finally learn its lesson about not trusting central bankers and communists, so that our children will finally learn that God's money, gold and silver, that's God's money. That is the only money you ever need to use. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's my hunch. And I looked at the amount of money that Trump spent. Do you know what I said?
What?
That man knows something. That man knows something. That man's been through bankruptcy before. Doesn't he know spending all this money is putting us into bankruptcy? Maybe there's something here. Maybe he's smarter than the average bear. Maybe he sees what's coming and he knows how to push it off the cliff.
So it's almost as though that
Just
it's
a thought.
almost, yeah, it's just a thought. Can't disagree.
Oh, you could.
Well, no, I could, but the theory makes sense. I mean, there's only one reason why you keep walking toward a gaping chasm of a hole. Either you don't see it coming, which can't possibly be the case here, or you want to fall in it for whatever reason.
Right.
So no, I'm not dismissing it out
Did
of
you ever
hand, not
see
at
the
all.
movie The Last Crusade with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones
Yeah,
and
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, absolutely. I
Indiana
remember.
Jones and the Last
Yeah,
Crusade, and his
Sean
father,
Connery,
Sean
absolutely.
Connery,
Yeah,
was the
absolutely.
elder Professor Jones.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last scenes, Sean Connery, the elder Professor Jones is telling the young Indy, you've got to go through this, maze thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Indiana gets to the cliff, and it's a long jump to the other side. And he goes, what am I supposed to step out on? And he opens up the picture and he sees the knight holding on to the chalice, stepping out in faith. And he goes, okay. And he steps out in faith. And what does he land on? He lands on a
walkway.
bridge, a walkway that looks exactly like
Everything else around it.
It looks exactly
Yep.
like the diet, but you can't see it unless you
Unless
move
you're
to the
angled a certain,
side.
yeah, exactly.
That's what we're doing. We're stepping
Okay.
out on faith,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And do you remember last summer the revival that went running around the country starting at Asbury University?
I remember that, yes.
Don't you think it'd be nice if we had a revival and got back to God a little bit?
It would be nice to see something happen in the country from a moral perspective, because we're going right down the toilet.
Right? We're stepping off that. Well, if you get too far from one side or the other, you ain't stepping on that bridge. You'll go right over the edge.
No,
right?
no. So let me ask you this. When this hits, whether it's mitigated, unmitigated, whatever, how long does it take for the US economy to come out of it? Because this is not going to be a short-term fix, not by any stretch.
You're going to have to say that over again because you froze up.
Sorry. When this hits, mitigated, unmitigated, doesn't matter. How long does it take for the US economy to recover from this? Are we talking a 1930s period of economic in the wilderness here? Or are we talking, I mean, it's not going to be anything short term, quite obviously, because when this one hits with all the elements that make it up, we're talking a nasty period of time here.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take for the U.S. economy to recover from this? Is this the bottom that everybody has sort of said in one form or another? This economy's really got hit. The bottom that should have happened back in 2008, and the central bank wouldn't let it happen.
Right. I think it's going to depend on the state that you're in. If you're in one of these 25 states that is going back to gold and silver, I think those states' economies will do much better than states that try to rely on inflated, worthless Federal Reserve notes to run their economies.
Okay.
So I think it's going to depend on which state you're in. But, you can kind of imagine those blue states flipping over real fast.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Can like over in Chicago, can you imagine? Well, I mean, the Chicagoans are already pissed off at their mayor. But, can you see pitchforks and torches?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can.
So I think it's I think that I don't think it's going to take a long time, like not a decade, but I think it could probably take a good year or two,
Okay.
you know. Um
Okay.
I think that once you get the majority of states that are on a gold and silver specie, um, gold back kind of a currency, or like Texas and Tennessee are coming out with their own gold tokens. I think the faster you can get to real money, the faster your state and local economy is going to recover. And then I can imagine that states will do individual business with other countries instead of the United States
Right.
operating, the federal government operating as the middleman. You would have state delegates operating to do foreign trade with other countries, and it would be gold and silver backed. It would be asset backed. And I just have this sneaking suspicion it's not going to take us 10 years to figure out how to make gold and silver work.
No.
I think we
No.
know this,
Yeah.
right?
We've just
Don't
gotten so
we?
used we've just gotten used to so used to a Federal Reserve currency, but I
Right.
mean, the American instinct to use gold and silver is still there.
Oh,
It just has
sure.
it's an instinct that hasn't been honed and refined for decades, but it wouldn't take
Right.
long at all to get it cranked up again.
Right. Right. And so imagine with me a situation where um imagine with me a situation where West Virginia, since it's made gold and silver legal tender, or is about to. I think they were in the process of. Um, Now, people who have worthless Federal Reserve notes, they should be going and buying gold and silver, or at least junk silver,
Right.
or toilet paper. Don't use your Federal Reserve notes as toilet paper. You'll get ink everywhere. Um, Sorry, couldn't resist.
No, I don't blame you. Go
But
ahead.
but what this is going to do is it's going to drive up the price of gold and silver as people start going, oh my God, I've got to get some gold, I've got to get some silver, I've got to get some junk silver. They'll start digging around in great granny's basement for those cans that she buried there, or the
Mhm.
backyard, or following the little.
The Folgers coffee cans. Mhm.
That's
Yes,
right,
that.
that's right, from way back in the day. um
Mhm.
so this is going to have a knock-on effect, right? The more people
Right.
desire gold and silver, the higher the price goes. I mean, we might even get to a point in time where any company that is minting gold or silver coins, and I'm talking other than the US Treasury, will run out of gold and silver. What do they call them? Blanks?
Mhm.
It's just a coin without any stamping on it. Hell, they
Right.
might just sell the coin without any stamping on it. Who knows? But
Exactly.
so what we're going to see over the course of probably the next year is a steady on rise in the price of gold and silver. And if you go over to a website called barcharts.com, so barchart.com, barchart.com/futures, another /metals, that'll take you to, do you got all that?
Got it.
Barchart.com/future/metals, that shows you gold and silver futures contracts. So if you can see that, you'll see that the futures contracts of gold for February, March, April, and June are way over 2,000. And the futures contracts for silver they're approaching $25. But this is in US dollars that is set by the London Metals Exchange,
Jeez.
which a couple of days ago is switching to the pricing that's coming out of Shanghai. So it's going to be that is going to push the price of gold and silver up, because the Shanghai markets are far more free than London or the COMEX over in Chicago. They're not as manipulated.
No, they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
You know,
does that make any sense? So
it
the
does.
answer to your question, I think, is it's going to take a little bit of time. I think that companies that are not prepared are going to get slammed. Like, for example, when our new president from Marshall University showed up on campus, he said to me, he said something like, we had sort of a get together of the College of Business faculty, and he was sort of welcoming us back for the new semester, and I was the last one out of the room, and I looked at him. I said, I am so glad you're here. I really am. And he said something like, it was nice to be here. And I said, I think you need to figure out a way of paying the people at Marshall in silver. Now, this is almost 2 years ago, January 2022. I think you need to figure out a way of paying your people in silver or gold. And he kind of laughed at me. And I said, I'm serious. And I said, maybe you'll listen when the inflation rate hits 40%. He goes, inflation's not going to hit 40%. And I said, yeah, it will. And then it will go hyper.
Jeez.
That was me 2 years ago.
Did he take your advice?
No. Okay. No, because, Brian, come on. I'm just a professor
of economics.
What do I know about gold and silver?
Who reads the news? Yeah.
Yeah. No, the men in my life who listen to me do really well. The men in my life who don't listen to me,
not so much.
Not so much.
Oh, man. I
bummed you out, didn't I? Well,
Merry Christmas, America.
Welcome to depression. Actually, I think I called it
fiscal or otherwise. There you go.
I think I called it oblivion in one of my previous interviews. It said, can we call it oblivion? But see, here's the thing: is the good news is that we are finally getting out from underneath of this Babylonian slave money system.
Right.
And on the other side of that, once we trudge through the valley of death, on the other side of that is more freedom and more prosperity, because your money will have value. Yep. When you work your 40 hours a week and you're paid 40 hours in gold, that gold still has value for generations.
Yep.
Right? You only have to work once for your money instead of twice or 10 or 40 times. And if you're not taxed to death, and don't you think people will finally get this lesson?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, one of the things that's going to come out of this is economic literacy. Albeit we're going to have to learn, society is going to have to learn it the hard way. Because, the thing that amazes me, because, I mean, you're coming at it from an economic standpoint. I'm coming at it from a political horse racing handicappers perspective. And I'm sitting here looking at going, in 3 years, this is the disaster that we've set ourselves up for.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 years, we've managed to do that. Now, I'm not naming any names. I'm not trying to get political at the end.
Right.
But I'm sitting here going, I remember the previous administration. I remember the current one I've got. I'm not saying the previous administration was perfect, not by a long shot. But somebody over 3 years ago had better sense of how to run the federal government than the current bunch that we've got right now, and I'm sitting here going, in 3 years, we've managed to set up this mulligan stew of a disaster that's about to befall us. I'm like, oh my God. But to go back to my point, we're going to have to learn it the hard way. But the other side of it is there's going to be a whole generation or 2 or 3 or 4 that's going to be like, never again.
That's
never
right.
will we let this happen.
That's right. And that's the whole point. Some of the hardest lessons that God taught his children came after long, long, long years of suffering. I mean, how many years were the children of Israel in Egypt? 400?
400 years. And then 40 years. And then 40 years in the wilderness before they hit the promised land.
And why did they have to wander 40 years in the wilderness? It's not like Moses didn't know where he was going.
If I remember my days from Sunday school, it was disobedience when they got to the Jordan River.
They had to wander 40 years for all the people who had been born in Egypt under that slave system that wanted to go back.
Mm-hmm.
They had to wait 40 years for all those people to die so that only the Israel children who were born in freedom and only knew freedom could cross over the Jordan. That's why they wandered 40 years in the wilderness. They couldn't take the slave mentality into the new world.
I had not thought about it from that perspective, but that makes perfect sense.
We cannot take the slave mentality into the new world. We've got all these people who were born in the Babylonian money slave system that are going to clamor for government help. Can't do it.
Yeah.
You can't do it. That's how we got here.
Yeah.
How did we used to handle things back in the day in our communities when there wasn't any government help?
We had took care of
each other, right?
We had communities. Families took care of each other. Neighbors took care of each other.
Neighbors took care of each other. Churches took care of families in the church, took care of families in the church. It was community. It wasn't government.
Neighborhood associations, the women's club, the gentlemen's. Yeah, I mean,
there you go.
The stronger sense of community was there because the hard times were on, and people realized we've got to band together. We cannot rely on anybody else. So yeah.
Now I'm going to remind you a little bit of your history.
Okay.
A little bit of West Virginia history.
Go ahead.
When did West Virginia become its own state?
1863.
June the 20th.
June 20th.
Why did they do that?
If memory serves me correct, it was a disagreement over the question of slavery with the mother state, Virginia,
right,
where we said, no, we're not going to have slavery in these 55 counties. Richmond said to us, the hell you won't. You will have it because we're one state. We petitioned the federal government in Washington. We wish to secede from Virginia, and by vote of the existing Congress at the time and by signature of then President Abraham Lincoln, West Virginia became her own state on June 20th, 1863.
Exactly so. Now, was that an easy task?
No.
And did the West Virginia economy suffer because it wasn't connected to Virginia after that?
Yes, it did.
And didn't that make families and communities that much stronger?
Absolutely, it did.
Because we had to rely on each other. We had to rely on families. It wasn't until the 1950s families were still living multiple generations in the same house.
Yep.
It's probably closer to the 2000s here in West Virginia, but in the 1950s in Michigan, families started not living together. Well, think about this. If my great-grandmother had a land patent for her house, which meant she owned it outright, the government could not tax her. She had a land patent for her house, and her children moved in and took care of her when she was old. And then the grandchildren were there to take care of the next generation that was old. And then the great-grandchildren moved in to take care of the next generation of old. Who's making a house payment if that property was paid 150 years ago?
No one.
That is generational wealth. And that is what West Virginians need to remember. That way, we're not sending our children out when they're 18 to try and struggle on their own and never get anywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? There's no
Absolutely.
reason that families cannot cohabitate, except for we're not accustomed to it.
Exactly.
We've been learned out of it.
Yeah.
We've been shamed out of it. Oh, you live with your mother? Oh, that's horrible. Half the people on my street are old people living with their older parents. And the grandkids live with them right now too. I've got multiple generational homes on my street where the grandkids will never have to make a house payment because that house is already paid off.
Yeah.
That's how you build generational wealth. That's what West Virginians need to remember so that they don't go hand in hand to the government. They rely on their families to bolster them.
Yeah.
Right? And when we had that, did we have slack asses in the family? Not many.
Not
Why?
many.
Why? Because y'all get together at a family gathering and you got 40 or 50 people there, and someone's looking over there and going, you didn't come to work this morning. I had to hoe your row for you. They held each other to account.
Yep.
Nobody slipped by, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And that was back in the day when the elder parents were the matriarch and patriarch of the family.
Yep.
Remember that when we used to adore and take care of our elders and respect them because they were our elders? See, there's so much of our Americana family history that we are going to be eventually shifting back to because that's a good way to do things.
Yeah.
It's a good way.
And it will take hard times to force that to happen.
Right.
But in the end, it makes for a more free and a more prosperous society. I wholeheartedly concur.
And I think personally, I think West Virginia has that closer to the surface than people say where I come from in Michigan. Because where it's so close to the surface, I know lots of people who live with their elder parents. So it's the elder parents, it's the 60-year-olds, it's the 40-year-olds, and it's the great-grand.
Yep.
A lot of people. It is closer here in West Virginia than, say, in Detroit, Michigan, where people are booting their kids out of the house at 18. Well, go on, off you go. Make your way in the world.
Yep.
Good luck.
Yep. As opposed to preparing them to do so by you've taught them what they need to know, or you've given them the time to at least build those skills and that understanding. And then it's like, okay, do you feel like you're ready?
Right.
Yeah. All right, then I'll help you get started. And if you ever need anything, you let me know. But it's your life now.
It's like my neighbor Joan up the street. She did that. She prepared. She had 6 kids, 2 of them adopted, and all in a teeny tiny little house. And she prepared them really well. And when they moved out, they went right next door to her.
Yep.
So if you need anything, I'm right there.
Yep.
They literally, 4 of them live around her, and 2 of them are 2 streets over.
Wow. That's cool.
All right.
That is cool.
Yeah. And so it is a good way of bringing up families, right? Yeah. Because that's the way you pass those values from great grandma and great grandpa down to grandma and grandpa, down to mom and dad, down to the kids. That's where we lost our moral code. Our families were splintered and thrown to the winds. And so the moral codes of the great grandparents never made it to the great grandkids because they weren't there around them all the time, learning and being with them. This America is going to relearn how important family is. They're going to relearn how important community and church is. And just maybe, how about just talking with God? Maybe
Be a
you don't
nice
like to
start.
go to church. Maybe just, read your Bible. I don't know.
It'd be a nice
Just
start as
so
opposed to
yeah.
having discussions about pronouns and everything, every other insane
Yeah,
silliness we're
I
engaging in
know.
these days. Absolutely. Well, Robin, this has been absolutely fabulous, and I want to thank everybody who's been watching on YouTube, on Rumble, on Twitter. We are definitely going to have you back on because
Oh, thank you.
2020. Oh no, 2024 is going to be a really interesting year, and we've got to have somebody who can shine some light on the economic madness. And definitely, you're coming back on. You
Oh,
have just
thank you.
become the unofficial economist of the Electronic Front Porch. And we'll work out a contract where you get paid in fig Newtons and scotch, but how that happens, I don't know yet. But anyway, hang
You
on.
know,
Go
just
ahead.
a thought, you could do your front porch live on your front porch with the fig Newtons and scotch during the summer. We could just hang out.
I have had more than one person give me this suggestion. I've got to do it because the reason, in part, that I do it back here in this little study of mine is the fact that I can control the sound, I can control everything else, and it's like I've got a certain amount of aesthetic control over surrounding.
Sure.
Put it on a front porch. I got a car going by, or I got
Or a
um,
back porch.
or a back porch or whatever. But yeah, it needs to happen. But hang around for a second. We'll say some proper goodbyes. Folks, thank you so much for stopping by for Chatting on the Porch. We will be back in 2024 and with content and interviews related to elections and all kinds of other issues. So have fun with your families. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a Happy New Year. We'll be seeing y'all soon with more videos, more live streams, etc. But in the meanwhile, remember the reason for the season. Merry Christmas and